Hello and welcome to the W Freelancing podcast, where you learn how to raise your rates, get more clients, and just generally have a way better life as a freelancer or agency owner. I'm your host, Zach Swinehart, and today I'm here with Tim Davidson from cleancommit.io to talk about AI content creation that doesn't suck. Tim is in the accelerator community and was sharing his process with me the other day, and he's been gracious enough to come on and tell us all about it. So the big thing that freelancers do wrong, or that businesses in general do wrong with AI content creation, at least in my opinion, is that they just like paste something into ChatGPT, let it do its bullshit magic, and then copy and paste that out and put it on their website with no intermediate steps. I've tried ad nauseum with DYF to like train a ChatGPT model to try to get it to actually create stuff that I like, and I have been unsuccessful. Tim has a cool, innovative approach that is like creatively using the API or some magic thing. I don't know. We're going to find out. And it seems to get much better results. So before we jump into that, I'll give Tim's little intro. So he runs cleancommit.io, which is a website development and conversion rate optimization agency for e-commerce brands. They've been in business since 2018. And cool thing about their business is that they still work with over 95% of the customers they've ever worked with. So everyone likes to keep working with them that hires them in the first place, which I think is really cool. And they basically work to make your e-commerce store more profitable and increase conversion rates. And from clients that have signed on this year alone, they're already on track to add $1 million of extra revenue for those clients, which is pretty cool. And their most recent test they ran for a client that produced great results was 12% increase to average order value, 7% increase to conversion rate, and that was in the span of just a week, which is pretty epic. So it's been really cool to see Tim taking this new direction. And as like the DYF Zach person, it's been cool to see this transition from web development agency into conversion rate optimization agency. And Tim, I know you're like mid process of navigating that, so you're not going to want to be positioned as some guru or something, but I am excited to see it, and I'm excited to see where you are in a year. So pimped up intro aside, hi, Tim. Thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Hello, Zach. Thanks for the intro.
So I'm wondering, is there any way we can talk about AI content generation that is not going to be like weird and uninteresting for somebody who's on audio only? Because like, I feel like we have to look at a screen. Maybe this won't be good for audio. I don't know.
There's a lot of screen looking, unfortunately. I can probably commentate my way through it.
I'll try to describe things. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty hard. It's like, unless I'm saying click on this button, click on that button, it's going to be a bit hard to do.
So what I'll do, dear podcast listener, if you're on audio, is if we do this and I decide it's like probably not going to, you know what? No, because I would just not air the episode. So if you're hearing this, podcast listener who's not on YouTube, it means it's good. If you're not hearing this, then I don't have to tell you anything because you're not hearing it. So, Tim, I guess I'll start like maybe the first question is, how did you arrive at your current workflow? Because I know you've been experimenting with a lot of AI content workflows. Yep. So how'd you get here, and what do you think what makes this one awesomer than past attempts?
Okay, so a bit of background. Towards the end of 2022, I think, I decided to take writing content a little bit more seriously. And the only way to do that is be consistent and really hammer out as many articles as you can. And I had burned through a bunch of contractors. So hard to find someone who can write properly and also is knowledgeable. They just charge way too much for what I considered to be like fairly mediocre content. So I ended up just using ChatGPT to do a lot of our articles. But I had to kind of build a framework around it because, as everyone knows, it sucks for writing content. It's just the prose that it comes out with is no good. So I built 1 million prompts to kind of point it in the right direction, but that wasn't working out so well. Luckily, I have a team full of engineers, and they gave me some ideas on what we could do with the API because they actually read the documentation, which I never have. And that gave me some ideas. I started looking at the feature set of ChatGPT, which is, something that not many people have done. And there's one feature that came out not at the beginning of the platform, but it was like a later release, and it's called fine tuning. And when I found that, I was like, all right, well, this sounds exactly what I want. Because the problem for me was that I could give ChatGPT a framework to write content, but it always read like a robot, no matter how many times I was like, stop using that word and like, don't write in this way. So the fine tuning model, the whole idea is that you train it on your voice by giving it a bunch of examples on how you write and correcting it. So when I discovered that, there was still quite a bit of playing around to kind of get it to work in the right way. But I've now figured out, because I have a client that I write content for, that was part of our agreement, and I have to do quite a lot of content for them. I needed to figure out a way to write SEO optimized content where I didn't have to figure out, like, I didn't have to think through it. I just had to go and spend the time doing it. And that's pretty much the outcome that I've arrived at.
And I know that with the changes to the Google search algorithm, you've had challenges with your own content stuff. Is this, especially for this client that you're doing content for, like, is this approach still working from an SEO perspective, or is it too early to know, or what's the status there look like?
Yeah, so like, I'm not an SEO professional, so the SEO people out there in the wilderness may disagree with my sentiments on this point, but the people who were hit the hardest by the algorithm change were affiliate marketers and people who write content for the sake of writing content. Companies like e-commerce, service agencies, like other websites where your primary purpose isn't writing content, weren't really affected by the algorithm change, especially if the content that you write aligns with your mission as a company. So it kind of depends on what you're doing. If you're an affiliate marketer and you're trying to make money through commissions of selling Amazon products, then yeah, this technique is probably not going to get you very far. But if, like most of the community who's probably listening to this podcast, you're like a small agency that just wants to build visibility so people know your name, and you have more traffic coming to your site and you can build some expertise around topics, then yeah, it will definitely help.
Okay. And one thing that I should have mentioned in the intro for the listeners to know is that Tim does get leads and clients from SEO. It sounds like, Tim, you were saying it dipped a little bit. And I know your challenge has always been that a lot of your traffic is around like code articles that a client wouldn't read. And so once again, I'm sure Tim doesn't want to be painted as some guru here. But the point that I do want to call out is that, like, you are getting traffic and you are getting clients. Probably it's not something you'd recommend. Well, I mean, I'll ask actually. If someone's considering doing this versus cold outreach, because I know you're running cold outreach, presumably the idea is that if you need a client ASAP, this is not worth it. But if you want to augment your cold outreach and build like a longer term pipeline, it's worth it. Is that where you see this, or where do you see this in the kind of clean commit marketing stack?
Totally. This is like, it's like the start of the machine, to put it that way. So the end of the machine is like cold outreach is one way to do it. It kind of skips all of the steps, but I guess the best, most sustainable way to build leads that I've found, that I haven't got to work super well, but I still think is the best way, is building a really tight email lead magnet that attaches to a campaign where you can get directly into someone's inbox and persuade them to work with you. But to do that, you need to get them on your email list first. So writing a bunch of interesting content where someone can connect with your message and be like, hey, this is actually really useful, is the best way to build your list. Well, not the best way. There's other ways that are probably more effective, but in my experience, it's a really good way to do that. The other kind of big benefit of writing content is that it, like a rising tide lifts all ships, or whatever the expression is. So it's unlikely to get you a lot of direct leads. Like, someone's not going to read a blog article and be like, oh man, that was such a good blog article, I'm going to get this guy on the phone, I'm going to give him heaps of money. Usually people read it, they get their answer, and then they leave. But what it does mean is when other sites are like, hey, I need to reference something in my article, I'm going to give a link to that blog article. And as you get more backlinks from other sites, then if you've done internal linking right, then your like money pages also get boosted. So all of a sudden your money page, it's like, hey, we do CRO, that's our main landing page, but we're not on the first page of Google. I wrote 100 articles and now we're like the first page of Google because we've got so many backlinks and I've pushed all the Google juice onto my money page.
Nice. And when you say money page, like that's the one that's driving the leads, or what do you mean by that?
So money pages are not blog pages. They're like landing pages where you're trying to convince someone to take an action.
And your money pages are straight up ranking as a result of the internal linking, you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, not so much anymore because I've done a bit of a flip between web development and CRO. But back when I was writing lots of content, yeah, my domain authority, which is like doesn't hold a lot of standing in how much you can do with your website, but it's just a very general, like, how good is your website? My domain ranking went from like 14 or 16 when I wasn't writing content to 53. So now I rival big companies, like companies with hundreds of employees for domain ranking. Wow. That means when I write an article now, it kind of skips the step of 3 weeks of floating around the bottom order before Google's like, yeah, this article is really good. Like as soon as I write an article, it's on the front page.
That's awesome. So let's paint some of the dream outcome here, like the end state. So, because again, I feel like I should have done this earlier. It just struck me I didn't, because I know it. The listener doesn't know it. So right now, for an article that you consider to be good, that you produce with AI help, what would you reckon your average time commitment is per piece?
Yeah, so I think the content writing part would be about half an hour, thereabouts, maybe a little bit less. Because as I was saying to you earlier, when I do this now, I'll spend time figuring out the keyword. Like the keyword research is really a lot of the magic. If you can find the right keywords, then it makes your life so much easier. Once you've got a good keyword, then writing the actual content is like half an hour sitting on the couch watching reruns of Game of Thrones, and then another half an hour going through the content, making sure it's like a little bit unique and has a bit of your personality in it and has images to support the content.
And so your flow, as I understand it, and I think I might understand wrong, so I'm hoping you correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is that your flow is basically step 1, keyword research. Step 2, you create some kind of content brief manually, like you probably have a template for the AI. Step 3, your AI does the magic shenanigans. Step 4, you revise and publish. Is that the 4 steps?
Yeah, pretty much. So I've actually got my steps written out here. So first is keyword research, and there's a couple of tools that help me to do that. I won't go into detail. I don't know if you want to do this, but I can take you through the step-by-step process. But yeah, figure out your keyword research. And then you need to have your model pre-trained. So that's like a one-time thing, depending on what kind of content you're writing. So for me, I write content for a client and then I also write it for myself. So I had to go through the process twice to get the right voice. But once the model is trained, then it's a case of plugging your keyword into Surfer SEO, grabbing the output, and then just a bunch of copying and pasting, building the article, and then going through and revising it and putting images in and cleaning up the content.
So keyword research is not with Surfer SEO. It's with like Ahrefs or something like that?
It also is with Surfer. It's the tool I've found to be the best, but there are a couple of other tools that I've used. One of which is called Keywords Everywhere. Keywords Everywhere is a Chrome extension. And anytime you search for a term in Google, it will come up and just put like a number next to the search bar. But it doesn't give you the difficulty. So kind of the two things you're looking for keyword research are the volume of monthly traffic and how difficult it is to rank for. And all of the online gurus are like, just find a keyword that has 1,000 searches and is really easy to rank for. But those words don't really exist anymore, especially if you're writing them around a service that you're trying to persuade people into paying you money for. So I typically shoot for keywords that have somewhere between 10 to 50 searches a month. And what I've found is every so often you write an article for like a 50 search keyword, and then all of a sudden you'll get like 3,000 hits a month because the metrics are wrong.
Wow. And so this would be 10 to 50, but it's still marked as like easy difficulty, or what would the difficulty be labeled as?
Yeah, so easy to medium. I like, again, because I've got my domain authority up to 50, it's a maximum score of 100. I pretty much don't really worry about the difficulty anymore, unless it's like Surfer also has a metric where it shows you if people are paying for the term. You want to stay away from anything that someone's paying for, because you just can't compete with paid search. Like, that's how Google has set up the game.
And when you're looking for your keywords, like obviously this is a bigger conversation, but obviously the difficulty is you want to find the questions, like the valuable questions that clients would be asking.
Yeah.
So not writing things like how to connect Shopify to Zapier, although that actually might be a good one. But like how to write this JavaScript snippet in Spotify wouldn't be useful. So like, do you have any tips or things that have worked for you to find good client representative high intent keywords? Like, how do you ideate these things?
Yeah, I do actually. So one technique that I've used quite a bit of is using Google's People Also Ask widget. So when you search for a question, or if you just put a prompt into Google, so say for me, because we do a lot of work with Shopify, if I write into Google Shopify, then after the initial search results, it'll come back with like 4 or 5 questions that people have asked about Shopify. There is a plugin, I think it's also called People Also Ask. And what it does is it just goes and clicks on the next, like the last entry of the People Also Ask widget on Google, which loads the next 6. So it does that, and you can let it run. So I let it run for like an hour, and then it spits all of the results into a spreadsheet. I grabbed those results and I chucked those into the Keywords Everywhere extension, and it tells me if any of them have search volume and if they're difficult to rank for. But it's like the results have been a bit hit and miss. What I find now is it's better just to jump into Surfer, and Surfer has a section called Topic Explorer. So you just chuck your keyword in there and it'll go and do essentially the same thing. I think it does a bit of that research, and it spits out a ton of keywords, and they have like volume and difficulty attached to them. The thing is that you need to go through them. So I'll export that list and then go through all of them and just check if they're relevant to my, like the intent of the searcher, that's kind of the bit that takes a bit of practice, because you really need to go through and put your mindset, like align your mindset to someone who might be wanting to work with you, and try and find the gems in the rough. And it's just, they call it keyword research because it really is. It just takes time reading through the listings and kind of trying to figure out which one's the gold.
Do you think that so if you're going for these 10 to 50 searches, again, I don't know really anything about SEO. Want to learn, because DYF used to get a bunch of SEO traffic. Do you think that so like, let's say somebody has well, I'll just throw it out. So suppose you had this list and you were like, I don't want to review it. I just want ChatGPT to write all these articles. So I'm just going to do all of them. I'm going to think about it. Maybe some of them suck. Is it actually bad to create blog posts around things that are going to kind of like almost diversify what your site helps with? Like, is your site supposed to do one kind of thing generally? Like if you wrote one blog post about how to paste this JavaScript snippet, and another one about should you use Shopify, and another one about here's my best tips for grilling on 4th of July. Like, does that actively damage you in Google's eyes in your experience?
It's hard to say yes or no, but yes.
Okay. So that's why you filter.
Yeah, that's why you filter. But Surfer also, like, I'm not an affiliate of Surfer. I don't want to spruik it too much, but it does produce like buckets. So when it returns the keyword, so typically what you want to do when you're writing content And this is kind of how people search and how Wikipedia is structured is you want to make it as structured for someone who's reading your blog as possible. So if they use the breadcrumbs to get back into your like archive of articles, they don't want to just see like grilling in one section and like dolphin riding in another section and stuff about Shopify. They want to see like Shopify plugins and then a list of all of the plugins you've reviewed. And that's like one bucket. And another bucket is like conversion rate optimization. So the more organized you can keep your keyword mappings, the better you rank for those topics. And there is some kind of crossover. As long as you don't cannibalize on other articles you've written, then Google starts to realize that you're trying to write on one topic and it gives you a bit more content authority, topical authority, which is one of the things that Google has publicly come out and said, like, this is one of the things, if you do it right, will rank your content.
That makes sense. It gives them more data points to believe that your site is about a type of thing.
Makes sense. Exactly.
So as a thought experiment, suppose you had two routes. So I think you said each article takes you about a half hour, which I know it varies, but let's just pretend for the sake of this experiment, it is exactly 30 minutes. And you have two options. You can either spend 30 minutes on keyword research this week. Well, you can either spend 35 minutes on keyword research and write one article for 30 minutes. Thereby, you spent 1 hour to get 1 hour and 5 minutes to get one article. And you like picked a really good keyword for it. Or you could spend 5 minutes on keyword research and create 2 articles this week in that same hour. Which would you pick and why?
If I was starting from scratch, I'd probably spend more time on keyword research and just write one article because it is a marathon, not a sprint. If I'd already done some keyword research in the past, I'd probably just pick some articles, pick some keywords and go and write it because you really need to, like for my blog, I didn't really see much traction until I got 100 articles up and then we started to skyrocket. So you need to have lots of content. You need to write it consistently. So volume and consistency are king.
What kind of cadence would you recommend for somebody what? Yeah, I guess if someone's starting, how many posts a week do you think they should aim for if they're targeting actual SEO eventually? And then what cadence are you currently aiming for?
As many as humanly possible, depending on how seriously you want to take it. Like if you can write 2 a day, then do 2 a day. If somehow you have time in your hand to do more than 2 a day, then congratulations, you have way more time than I do. My cadence at the moment has been very mediocre for the last little while because we've been changing tack. But when I was in the depths of it, like a good week was 5 posts. If I could get one blog post out a week, then I would like definitely see a tangible difference in how much traffic was arriving on our site.
It strikes me that if I were to try to do this with DYF, like I feel like if you're doing 2 a day, it seems to me like you would hit that point of cannibalization somewhat quick unless the articles are about like really, really zoomed in like micro topics versus I had thought Google, at least at one point, was preferring mega posts, like the freelancer's guide to marketing, versus like, here's how to do this one specific thing within cold outreach. If I was doing posts about one specific thing within cold outreach, I could write 100 articles. But if it was like, here is an article that says everything you could ever need to know about marketing, like I really couldn't write too many of those. So what's your approach there to not hit that point of cannibalization if you're targeting such a high volume?
Yeah, I think you do hit that. If you're not doing broad keyword research, you do hit that really quickly. And I came across that early on, but depending on what you do, you can kind of branch out the kinds of content you write. So for us at the moment, I haven't posted any of them, but I've been working on reviews of plugins. So it's like, I'm never going to hit cannibalization because every review is on a different keyword. It's a different plugin. If you're writing guides and articles like that, it can be a bit tricky. But when you spend a bit of time, I should preface this by saying you should really never write an article unless you've found a keyword that has like data to support the fact that someone will come and check it out. And this is probably the most common mistake I've seen people make when they write content. They're like, hey, I have this article. It's awesome. Like people love it. Chances are it's not going to get seen by anyone because it doesn't correlate with the search term. Like unless you have a direct correlation, you use the exact words that people are searching for, it's never going to get seen. So you start with keyword research, then you write the awesome content, which is a bit of a skill because sometimes you're like, this keyword seems like it might connect with my idea a little bit, but I'm going to have to change my content a bit to kind of fit the keyword.
Yeah, this is a push-pull as we've kind of started exploring keyword-driven content at DYF. It's like, oh, I don't want to fucking write about that, though, is the thing. I don't want to give the thing this thing is asking for. So, yeah, I guess merging the two. Cool. So we have a little bit of context from the SEO side. Make sure I understand the steps. So 1, keyword research. 2, you get the keywords into Surfer SEO, and then it does some like crunching of things and then like gives you an output of some data about it, which you then paste into your ChatGPT model that you have fine tuning for. And then I know you have your API thing happening on the back of that, but the ChatGPT magic happens then, and then you curate it and like spend about 15 minutes, it sounds like, polishing it. Then you add images and stuff, post on your site. Is that indeed the 5 steps?
Yep.
Cool. So I guess next maybe we talk about the how. Because I guess when we started this combo, it wasn't even really thinking about SEO. It's just about how to create content. But then obviously we got into this because no one wants to create content just to create it. You create content for a purpose. And I think SEO is one of those. And I think that another one is augmenting other marketing efforts. Like it strikes me that as you're writing these review posts, if you're using some niche CRO software to build a list in BuiltWith for your cold outreach, and you have posts on your site that are tips about those. Like I know Thomas, the cold outreach dude we both like, he talks about sales assets and stuff. And one of those articles that you might have written for the SEO potential benefit would also benefit as like a sales asset you can link someone to build your authority in the cold outreach and stuff. So that's an aspect of it too. But yeah, we have an idea maybe of like a loose approach for SEO. If someone's wanting to learn more about this, like I'm sure you learned from a bunch of sources, but if I wanted to learn more about, say, keyword research, do you have any tips of places to learn that? If I want to learn more about like writing articles from an SEO perspective, like where do you recommend learning SEO stuff?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I'm going to give a really disappointing answer. So the guy I learned this off had a YouTube channel and he was awesome. Like he was this like fairly overweight British guy with this big ginger beard, and like big Coke bottle glasses. And I was like, this guy knows SEO. But then he changed his business model and he deleted all of his content off YouTube. So I'm like, wow. I've got the lessons in my head now, but I can't bestow them on anyone because his content is just completely gone. He's got his name was Sean Mars, just gone. So, I mean, you can read blogs from like the big players in the market, but in my opinion, like Ahrefs and SEMrush and Moz and there's a few other guys like the Backlink Go guys, all right. But in my opinion, those guys are all kind of self-serving. So when you read the content, there's always an ulterior motive hiding below the surface, and they don't tell you the actual tricks they use to write content. So it's a bit tricky. It's one of those things where you just kind of need to go out and play around with it and figure out what works and what doesn't. There's no particular formula.
How do you learn what works? Like, I think the thing that attracts me to like ads for DYF versus content is that it's a very close correlation. Like you can see the data and know the implications of it because it's such a tight window. Whereas if I write a piece of content, like I don't know how long it's supposed to take before I would see if it's air quotes working, which what does that even mean or not? So if someone's experimenting, they're trying different things, they want to assess how it works. Like, how do you assess if something works? How long do you wait? What do you look at to know that kind of thing?
Yeah. So this kind of comes back to what you said before about splitting SEO away from the outcome that you're looking for. So for me, writing content was a means to an end. So I was assessing, and I am assessing whether things work based on how much traffic I get and whether I get signups to my newsletter or whatever the kind of next step is, whether people start contacting me. When I talk to clients, they'll often say, hey, I read this content and that's why I reached out. Or if I am, like I found this out with one of my clients after like 2 months of hanging out with him, he's like, oh yeah, before I contacted you, I read like 6 or 7 of your articles, and that's one of the reasons I reached out. So that's one way I assessed it, but it's really hard to do this until you get enough velocity to kind of see the trends. And you would know this from doing cold emailing. When you first start, you're not sure if the emails you're sending out are actually working, but once you've sent out like 500 or 600 emails and you can see which template, like you've tried a few templates, you've tried a few things, you can see which ones are working and which ones aren't. It's kind of trial and error, which is not the best way to do it, especially if you're spending half an hour on every article. But it's just like you just do it and you figure out what works and what doesn't by the results that come back.
Yeah, fair enough. So we'll change tack now to talk about the content thing. So my thought is that there are maybe like 2 audiences for this episode. One audience would be the one who's been really interested in what we just talked about, which is someone who's like, ooh, it'd be so cool if I was getting traffic via SEO. But I think like after evaluating a lot of different marketing strategies and stuff for freelancers, it's probably not something I would categorically like recommend. It's good to do, but is it the best route for most freelancers? I'm not sure, because most freelancers, when they do need clients, they need a client right now. Like that's usually the vibe versus I want to be slowly dropping drops into a bucket so that in a year or something, I can have something great. And so this second half of the episode, I think we'll speak more to the more common, like air quotes, use case for what we've been talking about today, which is like just having content on your site as an authority mechanism and as a nurturing mechanism. Like what you said of having somebody who read like 7 of your articles first. That kind of thing happens with DYF a lot. Like it's just the ability to nurture a relationship. It's the basis of having a newsletter, just building trust because there's so many people on the internet. And I feel like for freelancers, even if someone sucks at consistency, if they have a blog with, I don't know, 10 or 15 historical articles, and those articles aren't from like an absolute million years ago, like the most recent one within 6 months. Like I was on yours today poking around to try to find some of your newer ones. I think the newest clean commit article I could find was like October of last year, at least that's prominently featured on the blog. Yeah. But I don't think that's long enough ago to damage credibility. I think it's like, this person hasn't posted in 2 years. Are they even in business anymore? Like that's where you start to get into that territory. And so that said, I think for a lot of freelancers to get to that point where they have this like portfolio of content, it's really intimidating if they're not a professional writer because they just don't have the skill. And I think that's where this thing you and I are talking about today is really cool. And so that's I guess the angle is creating content to build your authority, augment your marketing efforts, like your cold outreach or whatever you're doing, give you a basis for putting stuff on LinkedIn or social if you're using social, and have it be efficient and not suck. So the first question I'll ask regarding the not suck is the fear I sometimes have with AI content is that if somebody's not a writer, like someone's just a developer, they maybe would think ChatGPT content is good by default. And so how would they know that it's bad and that it needs tweaking, things like that's where I kind of come at this. And I'm not sure if what we're going to talk about today would address that. Like, do you think your process lowers the like writing skill bar or does it just make it more efficient? Because it seems like you got to still kind of know what is good and what's not, which requires a skill bar.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it means that you can write an article that's not as good and still have it be effective. So your content is more likely to rank and it's more likely to contain information that you wouldn't have thought of because you're using AI, which is kind of the magic of writing content this way. Because as I said before, like I do a lot of this content while I'm sitting on the couch watching TV. So it's not like I'm sitting there kind of thinking about it, looking up references and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a nice benefit of it. Like even everything else aside, if you can get the same quality with a different level of deep focus required, like if you can get a nice quality article that you don't have to really think about, that's cool. That's a nice thing.
Yeah. I like in any article I write, if I write a really great article, it's going to be an aggregated article that has stats and like stuff where someone will read it and put it down and be like, man, that was awesome. Like start to finish, that was great. But Google doesn't rank your site if you write one of those articles every 3 months. So you need to write some content that's like filler, but has enough value where someone reads it and they're like, yeah, that's actually really interesting. And then they read some stuff like, this is informative, this is informative. All right, there's a unique point. So this technique does still involve you as the person who has subject matter expertise going into the article and adding like at least 3 kind of unique points that ChatGPT can't think of. So it's not completely hands off. You do at the end have to go through and put that magic in there, but it gives you like 90% of the content and it's written in your voice. So you can go through it and be like, I don't have to write that 90%. I just have to do the 10% really well.
Are you able to give with your process? Because I've been thinking of how I might use your process with my own content. And what I've been wanting for a while is to be able to have like, I usually write a very cursory outline for myself when I go to create a YouTube video or something. Have a cursory outline, maybe even record the video and feed the transcript of the video in or feed my outline in. Like, is there a way that you can in advance kind of share your take on something? So if someone was, if the thing that Surfer SEO spat out was like the best way to create a Shopify store, that's the kind of thing my concern would be that if I fed that into ChatGPT, like its definition of the best way might well be different than mine. And I think one of the kind of most important things at this point for content creation is being opinionated based on your experience versus aggregating all the possible ways, since that's like generic content that ChatGPT could do. Does your process involve that, or is it just let ChatGPT decide what it thinks is the best way? Or are you telling it what you're planning and it builds from there?
Yeah, I'm telling it what I'm planning, but I also don't write the outline myself. I let Surfer do that because it knows what ranks. So when you put your keyword into Surfer, it creates the article. It goes off and it analyzes the top like 5 or 10 posts that are ranking for your keyword. And then it breaks those articles apart and figures out which terms are being used the most frequently. It gives you an option to drop an outline directly into your article, which contains a lot of those phrases. So it gives you a bunch of H2s and a bunch of bullet points. So from that outline, and this is kind of getting into a bit that I should probably share with my screen, but from that outline, I go and take that, I take that whole thing and drop it into ChatGPT and say to ChatGPT, like, how does this sound to you? Like, what's missing? Can you, because you know, Surfer's doing this for an SEO perspective, and often I read through the headlines and I'm like, that doesn't make any sense in the context of like what someone would be reading, like going start to finish. You've talked about all of this beginner stuff and then some advanced stuff, and now you're talking about something that's completely unrelated to the topic. So I get ChatGPT to filter those bits out and I ask it if there's any kind of headlines or bullet points that are missing. And once I've got that outline, that's a SEO ready outline. And then I use my trained model to copy the headlines and the bullet points and just drop them in and say, hey, what do you think about this? Write me some content, and copy that and put it back into the Surfer article. Once I've got all of that content together, that's when I go and do my 15-minute revision and chop stuff out and put my unique points in.
That sounds cool. What I'm wondering is, like, suppose Surfer made the outline and it said like the best way to make a Shopify store is to use this, like a certain pre-built theme. And its recommendation of that represents the fact, like, this is where I run into challenges with keyword-driven content. Its recommendation maybe mirrors like searching intent or belief. Like, it mirrors what people are most ready to believe, but it might not be something you resonate with. Like, if, let's say I was doing something for DYF, it was like the best way to get clients. And all the shit that comes up for that, all the articles that rank for that are talking about like Fiverr. But I don't personally think Fiverr is the best way. I wouldn't want to write an art, and this is me as my special secret snowflake man who cares about the brand versus just putting out content to put out content. But I wouldn't want to create a content piece that advocates for something that I don't think is smart. But I would also feel conflicted. It's like, well, if I scrap this and like say my own thing, then it's not going to rank. So like, have you ever had that situation with the content briefs given to you, and what do you do when that happens?
Yeah, all the time. Sometimes the outlines go pretty off script for what you think they should be doing. And I'll I'll typically just add my own headlines to steer it back on track. If the outline is completely off kilter, then I'll just ditch the keyword and move on to something else. It's like, I have at the moment, I think I have maybe 300 or 400 keywords in my list, and that only took me about an hour to generate. So there's literally tens of thousands out there that could be driving you traffic. And it's not worth getting hung up on one keyword just because the article's not heading in your favor.
But it sounds like you wouldn't bother if you had an answer to the question, but it was like super different than what you were seeing from Surfer. You wouldn't even bother creating the article.
Not unless I thought the article was going to rank really well. So if I found a keyword that was like 500 hits a month and I knew a really good, unique response for it, and I could write a response that also ticked Surfer's box. So like Surfer has a scoring metric where if you get over 70% of the things it wants you to do, so you have the right word count, you have the right number of images, you have the right number of paragraphs, use most of the keywords that it's telling you to use, which you can do while you write into your own topic. If I could tick all of those boxes, then I'd go for it. But also keeping in mind that if you're using AI generated content, you're doing it because you don't have a lot of time. And when you start heading down this path where you're like, I want my content to be perfect, then you're kind of committing half a day to writing content, and it's probably not going to yield you half a day's worth of like return.
Yeah, that makes sense. So let's get into the nitty gritty then. So we'll have to figure out what of this, because like the way I kind of envision this interview going, the way I envision it, like supporting people, is that they understand kind of the roadmap. You give little, like almost like links out, but it wouldn't be an actual link, but you tell people where they can go to learn more. Because I think the thing that people will need to go learn about is like this API magic shenanigans you do. But I know you said you learned it from some YouTube videos, so we can like kind of wrap people there. Keyword research, we're not going to have you give us a master class on keyword research, for example. But like enough of a high level that I can go out and figure out how to do what you do. That's kind of my objective here. So that said, for nitty gritty, step 1, keyword research. I feel like maybe you shared enough for someone to go figure that out. So you said you use Surfer and Keywords Everywhere, and Surfer will just like straight up give you recommendations. So they could go in and search for the kinds of things their ideal client would be searching for. So if it's like me with top of funnel CRO for course creators, it might be like how to get more email subscribers for my course or something like that. And then Surfer will give you keyword recommendations, and then you like pick one, and then it'll give you a content outline for that. I think all this would be pretty intuitive to figure out. And then this is the dividing line of when it gets into your technical ChatGPT stuff. Is there anything I missed in that little summary that you want to add?
No, I think that's up to date so far.
Okay. So let's talk about your ChatGPT build out. So it sounds like you have a setup where you're using like ChatGPT in the chat.openai.com like interface. Is that right? Or is it always through the API?
So I use both. So the one I use for generating the content that has my voice is platform.openai.com, which is where you can go and access the OpenAI API, which is only available if you have a paid account. I'm not sure if you get it automatically when you sign up for like a paid ChatGPT account, because we use the ChatGPT API for building stuff. Like we've built wrappers, so it's just kind of sitting there and one of the things that we pay for. For anyone who's listening who wants to go and play around with it, I think it's pretty much the same price as paying for ChatGPT, and it does all the same stuff.
Yeah, I seem to remember that you don't like get it auto created, but when I created my like API one, I just like had to click a couple buttons to like enable it, and then it's charging you not like $20 per month, but it charges based on usage.
It does, yeah.
So so you get your outline from Surfer, you copy, you go to chat.openai.com, like you go to just the regular ass ChatGPT, and within there you have the fine tuning you mentioned. Is the fine tuning happening there or happening in the API part?
So the fine tuning happens in the API part.
Okay.
So
the parts. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, just to clarify, like I could do this without regular Chat GPT. I really only added that bit back into my process because I found the outline from Surfer was like just a bit mediocre. So it's like regular Chat GPT's only purpose here is to help me refine the outline. Once that's done, it's out of the equation completely.
Okay, cool. And do you have a custom ChatGPT model for that? Is it just going off your regular account settings? Like,
I've just
so
got
it's just
like
a regular ass new chat.
Yeah, I've just got a saved session where I ask it the same questions, but the questions are pretty easy to figure out. I just say, how does this outline look? Can you give me your opinion on whether this would flow properly, like a newspaper article start to finish, where the most important stuff is at the start and the advanced stuff is at the finish? Take out anything that seems like it doesn't align with the article, suggest anything that should be in there. That's pretty much all I say to it.
Do you have it simulate any expertise, like pretend you're a professional blogger or a professional SEO? Like, did you give anything like that?
No, because it doesn't. It's not writing. It's just giving me headlines and bullet points. So it picks up the topic pretty quickly. That's not true. I may have given it the topic I was writing on, so I might have given it the blog article title, but I didn't tell it like anything more than that.
Okay. So you do that. ChatGPT tweaks the outline a bit. And then if it was like me, Zach, special snowflake style doing it, I would tweak the outline a bit. Yep. And then now we have like our kind of V0.2 outline that we're ready to turn into content. And this is in fact where the magic actually.
This is where the magic happens. Yeah.
So this is the part where you're going to go to platform.openai and like, did you have to code a thing or you're like interacting in the backend, or what's this?
Yeah. So like? the first step, you only have to do this part once. This is like a configuration task. So you need to open a Google Sheet and you're going to be using 3 columns. So the first column is going to prompt, it's like the system response. So when you look at the fine-tuning documentation, it essentially says like, give me a system prompt that I'm going to use every time, which is essentially like priming ChatGPT for the way that you want it to write. So in my example, I just read you out what I wrote. So, and this is for the client that I write content for. So you specialize in blogging about medical clinics, specifically chiropractic.
Sorry, while you're reading it out, assuming if it's confidential, you don't have to share it, but can you share your screen if there's no problem?
Yeah, sure. I've just been waiting
but we will read it out for the audio only people.
Cool. Okay,
cool. So Tim is showing us a Google Sheet, has 3 columns. 1 column title is system message, column 2 title, ChatGPT output, column 3C, that is title, your style. And then he's about to read the system message, which is essentially it's telling not ChatGPT, it's telling the OpenAI thingy how to respond, right? That's the system message.
Yeah, it's prompting the system message for the kind of content that you want it to write, which is, we'll use this again. So you specialize in blogging about medical clinics, specifically chiropractic, physiotherapy, massage therapy, and alternative medicines. When you're prompted with a headline and bullet points, which is what we take from Surfer, expand on the topic of the headline and reiterate the bullet points in the voice of Tim Davidson and add more details so they become full thoughts instead of simple bullet points. Ensure your response is a detailed paragraph between 600 and 1,000 characters. Often it won't do that. Write in a casual, professional tone. Write in British English because I'm Australian. Explain your suggestions thoroughly and avoid making unbacked claims. So that's pretty much all the stuff I want it to do. That's not really the special part. So the special part now is you copy that and you paste it into your spreadsheet 50 times in all of the cells below that first one, which would be A2, because we're going to use that same prompt for every training line.
Cool. And
what you want to...
Couple quick notes. So number 1, could you copy and paste that to me in the community just so I can reference it?
Yes.
Number 2, I have played with using the OpenAI API in Zapier, and I think it can like pass in this kind of stuff via a Zap, right? So like what we're about to do, it's essentially so that you can like loop through this table. So could somebody potentially do what we're about to learn in Zapier, or will it require some actual real code?
No, it doesn't require real code, but it's also not really a Zapier task because
Okay.
this is just to get, this spreadsheet is just being used to transform the messages into a special format called JSON-L, which is what
Okay.
ChatGPT requires to train the model. So
Okay.
next step, so you've got your system messages copied in there. Next step is to write a paragraph between 600 to 1,000 characters in your style, which I've done here. This one's actually, I think it's about 300 characters. I just copied it out of a blog article. But this is how I want to write. So it's writing, quite concisely, and it talks just how I talk. What I'm going to do is drop that into ChatGPT and say, please rewrite this paragraph in your style.
And this is like just a new random ChatGPT chat.
Just a new chat. So all we're doing here is just getting ChatGPT to like give its robotic voice, and this is kind of, so we're reverse engineering the problem. We're giving it something that's awesome, and we're saying, hey, make this a bit less awesome.
Make it stupid.
Yeah. So when we go to train the model,
Cool.
we can say, here's all your stupid stuff, and here's what it should look like. So I go and paste that back in my spreadsheet. And I would do that 50 times. 50 times is usually enough, but I think the more you do it, the better the results are. So once I'm done with that, I'll download it. I think I need to download it as a CSV. There's a website that I had open a second ago called Novel Crafter, which I'll give you the link to a bit later. You can actually do the whole process on this website, without going through the spreadsheet, but I just find it way easier to do it in the spreadsheet. You upload your CSV or Excel file onto this website, and then it's going to give you a JSON-L file, which is what you need to put into the OpenAI API. So once you've got your JSON-L file, you jump over into the platform.openai.com. And I think by default, you'll be greeted with something that looks a bit like ChatGPT with a few more controls. And over on the left in the navigation, there's an item called fine tuning. So,
and can I stop you there?
Yeah.
I want to do a little recap for myself and for the listeners. So if you can go back to your Google Sheet real quick. So basically step one for the listener and future Zach, when you watch this and try to do it for DYF. Step one, new Google Sheet, 3 columns. System message, ChatGPT output, your style. System message is the one Tim listed earlier that I'll hopefully remember to paste into the show notes. It's basically just the instructions. You dupe that 49 times so you have 50 columns, 50 rows. More is better. And then in the your style one, you are just going to write a sentence, or rather a paragraph, specifically 600 to 1,000 characters, which it seems like it's about 2 sentences or 1 run-on sentence. Yeah. That is just something you've written that you like. Like it just sounds like you. So if I were to do this for DYF, I'll probably just go through all the emails that I've sent to the email list and just copy and paste random ass sentences so that once all 50 have been read, we understand what Zach looks like. And then, and this is where the Tim magic is going to happen, I think, is that he has ChatGPT write it. So in my case, I have custom instructions in my ChatGPT for it to like try to simulate my voice, which I think is going to create problems. So probably what I would need to do is have a chat with ChatGPT that has no custom instructions, so that it's like the raw, natural ChatGPT. And then you ask ChatGPT to rewrite the sentence that you wrote yourself, that you pasted in its own voice. And then you paste that into the sheet. So you do that 50 times. And I guess if you are listening to this and you've never written anything that you like, the first step is you need to learn how to write things that you like, and then write some things you like. You need to write at least 100 sentences that you like. So that's like step one. And then you now have this Google Sheet that has 50 rows of things you like and things you don't like. And I'm guessing that the secret sauce magic here is that when in the past I've like uploaded a bunch of DYF emails into a ChatGPT model to try to train it on my voice, it hasn't done a good job replicating it. But because of the fine tuning thing within the platform, it's like a higher quality of actual fine tuning, which I guess makes sense because the whole way that, I don't know much about AI, but I believe the whole way all this stuff even works in the first place is that it's trained on a bunch of like good bads, a series of this is good, this is bad, and it needs to see both. And by providing this, we're going to give it that. So once we have our Google Sheet with 50 rows, we are then going to go into that other site that you had pulled up, like Novel Crafter. What was it?
Yep, Novel Crafter.
Novelcrafter.com/tools/fine tunes, it looks like. Yeah.
Fine
and then
tunes. Yep.
Cool. Thanks. And we will export that Google Sheet that we made as like a CSV, and we'll upload it here into this Novel Crafter thing. And then Novel Crafter is going to turn that into the JSON L file for us to use in a minute. Did I summarize everything correctly?
Yep, that was right on the money.
Cool. All right. So we did that. We've downloaded our JSON L file, and then we go to platform.openai.com, which we would have had to. So I haven't seen this playground before, so I think I must be thinking of the API like settings back end. I have never seen the playground, but if you go to platform.openai.com, it sounds like the playground is what loads by default. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay, cool. And if you are on the podcast and you want to see Tim doing this stuff, he's like sharing a screen if you go to the YouTube or whatever. So you're in here, and then you said you click fine tuning, or where do we go next?
Yeah, exactly. So you click fine tuning in the side navigation, and I've uploaded a bunch of models in the past. So there's some information in here in case you're watching my screen, but for anyone doing this for the first time, you'll see nothing in here, and I think you'll be prompted to create your first fine tuning model. And the way that you do that is this little modal will pop up with a bunch of confusing options. All you have to do is upload your file into the drag and drop slot and pick a base model. So the base models will be pretty much all the versions of ChatGPT. You may think that using the latest one is the best, but word on the street is 3.5 is still the best for this process. So
interesting. That's what I was going to ask. Wow, interesting.
Yeah, because fine tuning, it is available on ChatGPT 4.0, but it's still kind of in beta, and you get some pretty wild results out of it. So if you want a consistent result, just stick with 3.5 turbo.
And it looks like you'd go, so I see in Tim's screen there are 3 options for 3.5 turbo. Do you just pick whichever one has the largest end number?
Yeah, just pick the latest one, which is 1106 for me. Yeah. So once you've done that,
base models, cool.
Yep. Once you've done that, I think, so you do want to add a suffix, which it's not, none of the other fields are mandatory, but I found that just looking at my screen, if you don't add a suffix, then you get a whole bunch of system generated numbers at the end of your model, which makes it quite difficult to pick from the list, especially if you're creating multiple models, which you may need to do, because you'll find with anything ChatGPT related, you often have to do it a few times before you kind of get it to work properly. So just looking at my screen, I've got like 6 models, and I think the last one was the only one that really ticked the box for me. So yeah, put a name in there is the message I'm trying to say. So, and we've got our
the way you name it
now.
The way you'd name it would probably, because I see you've got medical tech there. So if I were doing this for a client and also for myself, I might do one that was like called DYF-V1 or client name -V1 or something.
Yep.
And then I'll just keep making new ones if they suck, and then hope that eventually, like, so all these ones for you that I see, it's like you trying to make it, and you did the exact same steps to make it. It just wasn't as good.
Yeah, well, the first few were actually done by one of the guys on my team, and he did a different way to that which I did. He copied like whole articles and dropped them into the cell, which actually it did pretty well. It did better at generating content that was really long, but that for this process that I'm going through at the moment, I don't want my responses to be more than like a paragraph or 2 at the very most. So when I'm prompting my fine-tuning model, which I didn't really show very well on this initial screen in the your style cell, because this is only, what's this, like 2 or 3 sentences. I would usually actually write 600 characters for this, or like 600 to 1,000 characters, which, you know, can be several paragraphs. So yeah, I played around with it.
So that's my bad. I misrepresented it. Okay.
Yeah, I should have done a better job of showing this, because this is not accurate. You really, so the reason why I state in the system message, 600 to 1,000 characters is when I go through this process of Surfer spitting out the headline and the bullet point, I found that the ideal length of text to pop back into that outline is that like 600 to 1,000 character mark. So the whole way along, that's kind of what I'm trying to get ChatGPT to write for me. So when you go through and add your style, you can do that. But if you're someone who wants to like spit out a whole blog article, which ChatGPT isn't great at, it tends to max out at about 600 words. But if you want it to spit out 600 words, then just when you're writing your style, put 600 words in and it will spit out 600 words for you.
And I've mentioned to you before that like anyone listening who's seen DYF emails, they know I tend to write like my paragraphs are almost like one sentence each. Like I would say 80+% of the time a paragraph is a sentence, just because I like the way it flows for email. So in your style, if I simply have it where each paragraph is a sentence long, I'm not going to have to later explicitly say, yo, I want my paragraphs to be a sentence long. It'll just do it.
You should state in your system message that that's how you want it to return. So the system message should do a bit of describing how you want the output to be generated, but also when you're giving it examples of what you want it to do, then you should do that as well. Yeah.
Okay. So I might just in my system message that I'm customizing from your little template you pasted, just say like you write in a casual professional tone. You tend to write with short paragraphs that are punchy, about a sentence each, that kind of thing. Yeah. Like I would just write all that in there. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Be very explicit though. Yeah. Be explicit. Okay. So if you say like, I typically don't write more than, if I write a paragraph, it usually doesn't have more than 2 sentences. Because it will go off
instead of just short as possible. Right.
Yeah. Cool. Yep. Exactly. Cool. So where were we? We now have our fine tuning model. So you've uploaded it here. It's succeeded. Now you jump back out into Playground. So Playground, this is where we copy our system message and just drop it into the system field. Yep.
For the listeners, this is still just at platform.openai.com. And it's like the top left says Playground. He clicked under it, went chat, and then he pasted in the system message.
Yep. Actually, this may disappear when I pick a different model. So there's a little drop-down option in the top left, and you want to pick your fine-tuning model. So we're now leaving ChatGPT 3.5 and moving on to your model that you've recently trained. Actually, it didn't remove it. That's cool. So before we start writing, there's a couple of other things we need to do. We need to play around with the temperature and the maximum tokens. So tokens are what you get charged for. The more tokens you add to a message, typically the longer it is. So I tend to just crank this up because like even if you're writing a lot of content, the charges usually don't, for me anyway, they haven't gone above $50 a month. So that's a cost I'm willing to wear. And for temperature, start with 1 and then play around with it. If you want your writing to be super creative and think of stuff that you may not have thought about and use floral language and stuff, then go with a higher temperature. I've had the best results at about 0.9 to 0.85.
Okay. And then maximum tokens 2024 is currently, like you just did it all the way to whatever it'll maximum let you do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and then I at the moment, I haven't generated my content outline in Surfer, but I can show you what that looks like because I've got a bunch of keywords loaded up here. So let's jump into portable table. I think this one was portable massage. So I'll just zoom in. For anyone listening, I've jumped over to Surfer SEO, which I've mentioned a few times. This is an article that I've pre-generated, and at the moment it's just blank. But there's a prompt in the middle of the like WYSIWYG editor that says insert outline. If I click that, Surfer's going to take a bunch of the recommended keywords and headings, and hopefully this won't take too long, but it's about to list out its recommendation on what topics I should write on. So I'll just zoom out a bit. So we've got like types of portable massages, benefits, choosing the right one. I mean, that seems okay. This is a pretty lackluster article anyway. So this would be fine for the purpose. The next step for me, and this is the full start to finish process, so I'm going a little bit off script here. I hope that's okay, but hopefully this provides a bit of context to what.
No, this is great. I feel like I'm getting a master class here. This is awesome.
Yeah. So I'd start a new ChatGPT 4.0 instance. This is the only time that I use ChatGPT, and I prompt it by saying, I mean, I would do this with one I've already got, but I'll just do it from the start. So look over this outline. Please find any headings that don't make sense in the flow and rearrange them. If you find any headings that don't seem like they fit with the article, please remove them. If there are any topics you see missing, please suggest them. And then, yeah, at the start of this prompt, I would probably just say, we're writing a blog article about portable massage tables. Oops, tables. I can't spell. Okay, and then it will say, cool, give me a thing. I'll just paste this in here.
And this, actually, you just pasted the output from Surfer SEO, the outline.
Exactly. So I kind of skipped a step. What I would usually do, but I'm not doing it for the sake of the experiment, is when you copy the outline from Surfer and paste it into ChatGPT, it just lists each of the headlines and bullet points without any
it's not
styling
a markdown or anything.
Yeah, so you can't tell which ones are the headlines and which ones are the bullet points. I would usually go through and put like H2 or H3 or put like hyphens next to them so the system knows what they are. It looks like
what you might do as a side tip, by the way, if you were to copy from Surfer and paste it into Notion and then copy from Notion and paste into ChatGPT, it'll have all the markdown like pound signs for heading structure. So that might be a nice workflow addition.
Yeah. I'll try that when I'm not being recorded, but that sounds like a good tip.
Fine. It's just a side note tip thing.
Yeah, cool. So what it spat out now is a couple of missing topics. So what I'll usually say is, please add the missing topics into the outline, because I'm too lazy to copy and paste them in myself. And then it will go and rewrite everything. And I'm about to copy and paste this back into Surfer.
And by the way, for the listeners, he's using for this ChatGPT conversation the latest model. So as of today, it's 4.0. Yeah. And it's just writing the outline right now.
Cool. So I'll grab that. It's close enough. Cool. And delete the old content in Surfer. It's reduced my score a little bit, but that's fine. So now we get on to the actual magic. So what I'm going to do is go through each headline and bullet points and just copy them and paste them into the platform.openai playground, where we've prompted it to say it's expecting a headline and bullet points, and what it's going to do is expand on the content and then return something in hopefully my voice. So just make sure I pick the right model.
And so that prompt you put at the top, it's the one from that we made 50 duplicates of, that leftmost column. You just put it in this like little box, and it's telling it how to respond to whatever you type.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
So it's cool. It's priming the response. Let's see. Okay, that's going a bit too far. Something's happened here. Sometimes, I might have picked the wrong model, actually. I have picked the wrong model.
So his response is many paragraphs. It's like almost an article in and of itself versus just a few sentences.
I'll pick my preset. Let me just find... Okay, yeah, I picked the wrong model. That was the problem. Okay, so the other thing about Playground is once you get the prompt working properly and you're happy with the responses, you can save it as a preset, so you don't have to write everything every time. You just go and pick your preset. So let's try that again. This time I'm just going to nominate the headline as a headline just by writing headline before it, and then nominate the two bullet points as bullet points by putting hyphens in front of them, and then run that prompt.
And then the other side note tip, once again, for listeners, I bet if we just copied from ChatGPT into Notion, it would again like use Markdown. And I bet
Yeah.
if we had for our system prompt telling it that it's going to be given to it in Markdown, it would interpret the headings and bullets and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So I've just got the response back. So the prompt was headline, introduction, discover the benefits of portable massage tables for relaxation and self-care, learn about the importance of massage therapy for overall well-being. And the first sentence, I'll just read the first sentence. So portable massage therapy equipment is a great way to take relaxation and self-care with you wherever you go, which is like, might be a bit system generated. It might not be. I would go through and do copy and paste all of these headlines, and then at the end, run through my whole article and just remove the bits where I'm like, that doesn't read super well. I put some formatting in to make sure that there's, line breaks where they need to be, and put some images in.
So you would take this output from the playground and you paste it into this Surfer SEO tab, or where would you be keeping your draft?
Yeah, so for me, because Surfer is kind of the authority on how well this content is going to rank. You can rank content when Surfer says that it's not going to do so well, but I've had a lot of success with just like getting my content over the 70 out of 100 mark. So if I just show you what happens when I paste this in, that's up to 50 now. So yeah, I'll paste all of my content in Surfer, and then at the end, there's a few more steps I go through. So I'll typically hit auto optimize, and that inserts a bunch of the keywords that will help the content rank. And I'll hit the insert internal links, and because Surf is connected to my Google Search Console, it will go through and crawl my other articles and see if there are any matching keywords in this article where it can link to other content that I've written.
That's
and
dope.
Then it's really good. And then I'll go and do my editing and put my images in and stuff and make sure it's not said anything weird.
So let's say I did this. Let's say I did it and I didn't like the output. Mm-hmm. Would your gut be to A, just make a new model where I do absolutely nothing differently and just see if it's different? B, change... I know you do all these things. I'm just kind of curious your like order of operations, because it seems like the variables here are this. Number one, randomness that comes with AI always, even if all the settings are the same. 2, temperature. 3, was it tokens? I think it was tokens. Mm-hmm. 4, system prompt. 5, the actual training. So if you hated the output, you were like, oh my gosh, this is just so wrong. Mm-hmm. What would your first thought be? Like, which of those 5 things would you address first? What is your order of like adjustment to these things?
Training for sure. If it's completely off kilter, then training. The content that it writes based on the model that it's trained with is so exceptionally different that you need to start there and get it in the ballpark.
Okay. So you do 50 totally different rows, or maybe you'd like add more. What would you do?
It kind of depends on what it's doing. So if you find that the prose and the voice and the intonation and like the way that it's writing is not correct, I'd probably just add more content in there. Like I'd try and get more rows in to give it a better idea of where it's failing. But typically what you can do is you can spot where it's failing. Like it will be doing something where you're like, stop that. Like you're not writing long enough, or like the content is, there's going to be a problem that you can solve by changing the way that you're priming it.
With the system prompt.
With the system prompt, yeah. With your system message, or with the examples that you're giving it. So if you find it's too short, write longer paragraphs. If you find it's too long, write shorter paragraphs. If you find that it's one thing I found it was doing is like just never backing up its claims. So it's like, you can be a heart surgeon if you study. It's like, what? No, you can't. Like, that's not right. Or like something even more literal, like the Clean Commit website has the most traffic of any website ever. It's like, oh, wait, that needs a reference. Don't do that unless you have a reference. So I trained one of my models to give examples. And then within the examples, I had links to external sources, which it doesn't do super well, but I trained it to get to the point where it was only doing that if it had a reference and it was actually providing examples. So would be where I'd start. If you get the output and it's like it's writing in the right style, but the content is garbage, then you start playing around with the temperature, and that will often cure it. It'll give, like, if you want it to write to a script, just reduce the temperature, and that will usually fix the problem. If it's not writing long enough, increase the tokens. That'll usually fix the problem.
Okay. And why do you have ChatGPT write something you wrote in its own voice versus having ChatGPT like write an article and then you rewrite a paragraph as you would have written it? Or is there a reason?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Sorry.
So your process for creating those 50 rows is that you take a few sentences you've written, 600 to 1,000 characters, and then you ask ChatGPT to write that in its own voice. Why do you take that approach versus, like, say, have ChatGPT write an article on why you should use Shopify, and then you like rewrite a paragraph the way you would have written it? Is there a specific reason why you go the order you do, or it's just a preference? It doesn't really
do
matter?
It in my approach because I've already got a ton of blog articles. So rather than sitting down and writing content, I just copy and paste from stuff I've already written.
Cool. So if someone doesn't have a repository, maybe that route I just said would be better for them.
Yeah, yes, but I also would doubt that it would be quicker to do it that way. I think that rewriting something that ChatGPT has written, because you'd have to constantly look at it, would be very difficult. Yeah.
So maybe just like go out, write a few posts that they accept aren't going to be good for SEO or whatever, but they're just here basically just to know what they sound like.
Yep, exactly.
Other couple random questions. I know that our time is up, so I want to not have you here for a million years, especially since it's night for you. But I noticed this outline you were doing in the example, Surfer only ranked it at about 50. I'm curious of two things. Number one, once you've fleshed out an outline into an article, does the score on Surfer typically go up or stay about the same? Or
yeah, it goes up. So in that, I can share my screen again. So in that outline, or can I? Yes, I can if I talk slowly. In this outline, if you look over here on the right panel, for anyone listening at home who can't see, there's a bunch of like metrics that we haven't met yet. So the words are only 557. It recommends 804 to 925. Headings only 8. If we added one more heading into heading, there we go. We hit that one. It hasn't made much of a difference. But the point is that by the time you get through expanding this content, even if you don't explicitly try to hit the metrics, just by getting the word count up and the images, those two alone typically push it into the green.
Okay. And you'd like add your images here. And I guess if my blog's on WordPress, I can just fluidly copy and paste from Surfer into WordPress or whatever.
Yeah, so I haven't found a great way to do that at the moment. They do have an exporting feature, which I think might be reserved for the higher pricing plans. I just go with the cheapo option, which I think is like $30 a month, 30, 40 bucks a month, thereabouts. I copy and paste everything over, and then I have to manually go and replace the images because Surfer will, like WordPress will show you an image, and you will be able to post it.
The Surfer CDN or something.
Yeah, exactly.
That was my concern.
Referencing the Surfer CDN, which you don't really want to do.
Yeah, because then just one day they invalidate the CDN cache, and now you have no images.
Yeah.
Cool. So that was that one, and then the other one would be like if Surfer generated an outline that had a not great score, like is there any score at which you'd be like, well, I'm not going to bother with it? Like this one was 50. Is that? I guess it wouldn't generate a low scoring thing because it's generating it itself, right? Is that something you ever have to worry about?
That's not really a problem with Surfer. It's always going to be around 50. The bigger problem is if it generates an outline, you're like, that sucks. Like, I'm going to write that content, but I'm going to have to do some magic to like take the article in and make it into a story, which is more commonly the situation because it consumes the top kind of 5 or 6 blog posts and then builds its outline based on what they've written. Those articles are often a bit like meh, unless you're writing on a topic that's really interesting. So that's where I've been trying to use ChatGPT to kind of, without having to spend heaps of time on it, just build a better outline. So that's kind of the part of the process that I'm still working on.
Okay. So if I'm thinking through how I'll do this with my Zach secret sauce, do you reckon if my model was like, I let Surfer spit out the outline, the headlines, but I might personally delete all of the sub bullets and use them only as cues and replace them with what I believe. If I do that and the Surfer score is about what it was with the original outline, do you think that's like a good KPI, or might it be that once my bullet points are fleshed out into content, the actual score of that content will be worse than if I had fleshed out Surfer's outline into content? Or do you think outline for outline is fine? And if you don't know, I can just test it. I'm just curious.
No, I do know. I'm just thinking of a politically correct response. So it's really hard to get all the keywords into your paragraphs unless you start with Surfer's outline. Like I've done it before, but it takes the process from being half an hour to being like an hour and a half. So I would probably recommend just working with the bullet points it gives, because they're packed with those keywords. And I have specifically written my prompt for the playground to reuse the bullet points so it expands on them, rather than saying use this as a prompt and write something else. It's like reiterate what I've said to you and expand on it, because this is the content that ranks.
And then for this final step that I want people to not ignore, it's remember you're adding your own like final brushstroke to this canvas. And so suppose we had our fully drafted article from the playground and we generally like it. And we're either going to, like, if it were me making a recommendation for freelancers, I would say, especially based, Tim, on the success you've had with your more client wins scripted cold outreach videos and stuff, like, I would say the best thing you could do as a freelancer is, if you have stories about like work you've done for clients that tie into one of these bullet points, that's a really good way to add a personal touch or examples. So let's say somebody does that. They write, you said, I think three brushstrokes of yourself per article. Suppose you just like wrote that. It would just be a couple paragraphs or whatever. If it brought that Surfer score down by like a couple points, would you try to scrap it and write something else? Like, are you you're still okay? You don't care. So you just get the thing good in Surfer, and then you don't care what it says about your stories. You say, you know what? No, Surfer, my stories are good. You don't know anything, and you publish it.
You're not more likely to rank with a Surfer article that has 100 out of 100 score than you are for one that has like 70. Once you get up to that 70 mark, it's like you're doing all the right things. As long as it's the right length and it has interesting content, I think you do more damage to your article if it starts inserting fluffy stuff that no one really wants to read. So, and there's going to be some of that because it is AI content generation. Like, you can't expect these articles to be super unique and stuff that someone's going to read and be like, oh my God, this is the best thing I've ever read. I'm so happy that I found this article. Like, a lot of it is, it's framework for those kind of deeper lessons that you're going to insert. And it's supposed to be good enough and in a tone where someone can read it and be like, yeah, I really like this tone. I like what this is saying. Some of the messaging's good. I'm going to move on. So that's the goal.
Cool. So it sounds like your recommendation that I'm guessing for like DYF Zach is do the Surfer process Tim does, have the OpenAI playground write the article, and don't try to inform the outline myself, but add my secret sauce just there at the very last step and just ship it. Don't even worry about how that affects anything, but get the core article there. And if there's something I really hate, like if it recommends Fiverr and I don't want that, like delete it, fine. But get the core article written by the other thing and then just add the final brushstroke, and that's the flow. That's like the most efficient flow. Yeah,
I'd say like don't delete more than 2 of the headings that it gives you, but 2 is fine. Like, yeah.
Okay.
And if the output, if what you end up with when you go through and put the images in and everything is around that 60 to 70 mark, or getting up to the where Surfer's saying this is a green score, then sweet. If you can do that by removing half of the article, then sweet, go for it. I've just found that it's way easier to use the outline, but you can kind of condense that outline. It just has to be there, but you can write stuff around it.
Cool. Well, this is awesome. I'm really excited to go play with this. Anything you wish I had asked you, or anything else to share? I feel like as I say, I got like a content masterclass. But anything you think was missing from this convo for people to feel empowered to go do this themselves and succeed?
I would probably, the only thing that I really didn't go into depth on, which I would probably, if we were to talk again, if we had this conversation again and I shared my screen the whole time, I probably would have gone into more depth about the keyword research and kind of planning the content that you're writing, because I'm suffering from this problem a little bit at the moment where I wrote a whole bunch of content before knowing how to do this, and the clusters of what I wrote on are very not connected. So now I'm having to go through and delete a lot of the content I spent a lot of time writing. And I think if you were starting out and writing content for your blog, you'd want to spend a bit of time giving that consideration and do it in a mind map where you can at least see visually how all of your topics connect, which, is going to take some time because as I said, not all topics have search volume. You'd have to go and figure out which ones do, and then themes that connect them.
So are you saying that, like, if I were to do this for DYF, for example, like a top level mind map thing might be marketing. Top level mind map thing might be like raising your rates. And then within marketing, there might be cold outreach, Upwork or whatever, social media. And that's as far as you'd go, or you'd take this a step deeper into like social media has LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. Like, is that kind of what you're getting at, or what are you getting at?
Yeah. I think that's fine. If you were doing it that way, that would be a good way to do it. I guess my recommendation is, if you're going to write content for the DYF blog, don't jump from marketing talking about Facebook to like writing contracts as a contractor to like make sure legal ramifications are good with clients. It's okay to do those things, but just don't leave clusters of content with one article with nothing else to support them. If you're going to go down the path of writing content, commit to writing about marketing for a while and get your cluster filled out. So you've written about cold outreach, and you've written about social media, and you've written about like podcasts and stuff, and then go on to the next thing. So that's kind of where I was going with that.
So you would create these like interconnected webs. That's what you're getting at.
Exactly.
And to never create some like dead end that it's like a cul-de-sac with one house and all the other ones haven't been built.
Yeah. You need to be a specialist in your topic. Like Google wants you to go deep on a topic rather than wide and shallow.
So it sounds like you're saying, if you're creating the vision for Clean Commit, and right now you're specializing in e-commerce with a sub-specialization in Shopify, but you could help people with, I don't know, BigCommerce, WooCommerce, these other things, you would probably first maximize your web of Shopify specific ones, or whatever the like kind of parent category is. But or would you only care about like, because I guess what I'm wondering is, it's like, are you saying it would be bad to have one article on Shopify, one article on WooCommerce, one article on BigCommerce, even though they're all united within e-commerce? So that's, I guess, what I'm kind of wondering is it that we don't want empty subcategories, or we don't want empty top level categories?
It depends what your map looks like, I guess. So if Shopify is your floor level on your mind map, so you've got e-commerce and then whatever, a few other splinters, and then it runs down to Shopify, and that's the last thing you're writing about, then that doesn't matter. But if it's a hard question to answer. You can jump around, but you get a lot more benefit from writing deeply on a theme than you do for writing on, and what a theme is completely is up to what you're writing about. So I kind of can't answer that without looking at like what other topics you're going to write on.
Maybe an angle to ask the question from is, does that traction come from internal linking within the post content, or within other posts showing up in the category listing?
Both. So
okay.
There are some, there's a bit of magic that happens in Google's eyes when you start interlinking properly, but it also, like, it's smart enough to see that your blog has written, and I don't know exactly how it does this, but it's smart enough to see that your blog has written 4 posts about Shopify. So it starts, the next time you write about Shopify, it's like, I know what you're doing, so I'm going to start ranking you. So as long as the theme is clear, if you're writing about marketing, then it might just be like, great, you're writing about marketing, I understand the theme. So it's just a case of like not writing about marketing and not writing about legal stuff at the same time. Just keep it to one general theme. As long as you know what the theme is, then Google can probably figure it out as well.
But I could write about marketing stuff and legal stuff at the same time if each already had like 5 other posts in their own categories.
And if the overarching theme was like helping freelancers or something like that.
Right. So it sounds like if someone wanted to use a mental model, like a bright line of, if I'm writing a post, is there a basis where I could link to 4 other posts I've written in this same general area? And if the answer is yes, cool. And if the answer is no, this means you're paving a new trail, and you shouldn't do this unless you're prepared to create those other 4 or 5 posts also.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, this has been awesome, Tim. Anything else you want to share?
No, I think I'm out of tricks and tips and almost out of speaking at the moment. So
yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Again, for the listeners, if you want to check out Tim's stuff, he said theoretically someone could pay him to do this stuff for them, but that's not really something he would do. So you might be able to convince him if you throw a bunch of money at his face. But otherwise, if you happen to be listening to this and you run a large Shopify store or any kind of e-commerce and you want Tim to boost your conversion rates, cleancommit.io. And for the rest of us, we're just so thankful, Tim. So I appreciate it. Let me know how I can help you as a thanks for this time. I am excited to play with this. Cleancommit.io, Tim Davidson. I think that's all the things. So thanks so much. I'll hit stop. We won't disconnect, but thank you, listener, for being here. Oh, and also you can join Tim in the Accelerator community, dyf.link/accelerator. I almost forgot to promote my stuff. So Tim, I will hit stop and we'll talk in a second.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks.